integrating GRC in AI security, right? Now, the first point is really that there are some GRC frameworks that guides the AI security governance in general practice. First one is ISO 42001 2023. So I think most of us would know that there's a standard called 27001, which is ISMS, all right, which is Information Security Management System. Now, this is AIMS, which is Artificial Intelligence Management System. What it does and what the exact objective of AIMS is to give you a working management system in place to manage the AI risk and to manage the AI systems in general, right? The other one, which is quite famous, and some of these frameworks are something it's becoming a bit more popular and a bit more usable out there in the market. So you would see a lot of adoption from these perspective. The other one is NIST RMF, sorry, AIRMF, which is Artificial Intelligence Risk Management Framework. This gives you a sort of approach to understand what risk are inherently present in an AI system, and then how would you assess them, how would you remediate them, those risks, and what level of risk is again aligning with your enterprise risk management, and then does it fall under your risk appetite or not? All right. Now these are the two popular standards and frameworks that's widely used, and I closely work with these frameworks in terms of implementing with the client's environment and whatnot. All right. The other one is the compliance check, right? So compliance is standards that shaping the AI risk management perspective. Now, you would see that some of the countries have already started to integrate, AI into their existing legislations and their privacy impact analysis, or at least from a privacy perspective and whatnot. All right. So you would see a lot of buzzword around AI ethics. I'm not sure if some of you have already heard or come across this terminology. So AI ethics tells you a certain set of guidelines that needs to be there if you want to use AI in general, right? This is this is Australia's AI ethics principles. All right. Now, this is pretty much applicable to anyone who is operating in Australia, in general, but then it's not come into a full force or full effect at the moment. It's just a guidance at the moment, but then excuse me, the government is trying to push this hard in terms of everyone who is operating into the Australian market to this framework. And it's very similar that you would see that in most of the countries would have adopted to some or the other ethics principle, or some of the other privacy related things from a GRC perspective, or from a privacy perspective. So you will see that in Australia we have got 8 artificial intelligence ethics principle. Now these will help you to achieve safer, more reliable, and fairer outcomes. Now this is your key here, fairer. All right, because AI usually tends to become a bit biased when you give certain prompts, and that's where your prompt injection and those sort of terminologies will kick in and come into play. Now you'd see that it's becoming more and more difficult for companies who are building out AI systems and LLMs and whatnot, for them to be not biased in their for their customers. So this is the principle at glance. So you would see having the right accountability, being transparent, being fair, which is again no biasness included, or trying to reduce as much as we can, and then being human-centered values, wherein it sort of calls out that AI systems should respect human rights, diversity, and autonomy of the individuals and whatnot. All right. Now the thing is that with AI, it's a bit cluttered at the moment, right? So it's a bit in a haste at the moment, and then because it's obviously something new that has come up in terms of being integrated in the existing IT environment and the business environment and whatnot. All right. Now, from a GRC perspective, when it comes to the actual and real time and real life GRC roles, you would see that these sort of compliance related risk, or AI related risk and whatnot, the GRC professionals would actually be responsible to identify these and making sure that we as an organization is aligning to those principles. So suppose, for instance, let's take an example that if you're operating in Australia, right, that as a firm you have to align with AI ethics principle. Now, as a GRC professional, or whatever line of defense that you're sitting in, you'd be seeing yourself working pretty closely with the government on these principles and making sure that you're actually aligning with these principles. Okay. The other part that I was talking to you about, the AI RMF. So here's the framework. So this is the artificial intelligence risk management framework. I can post it in the chat for you guys, so you can refer back when you go back and you can have a read. It's pretty long, but then it gives you a very good idea to start off with, at least, that what are the risks that could be included here. So we'd see overall, from an overarching perspective, you would see, things related to data privacy, environmental impacts, and harmful bias, which I was, really emphasized on, human AI configuration, information integrity, intellectual property integrity, and whatnot. All right. Value chain or supply chain integration, which is again a pretty big topic in itself. So you would see that there's a lot of things in here that is identified, and that gives you a very good starting point in general sense for you to kick off and for you to integrate that into your, from a real world example perspective, that how AI is being integrated into existing systems. Now, this is something which is pretty practical in nature, that I've seen it actually happening in there. And there's a lot of companies who are trying to integrate the AI system into their existing business. And I'll show you one of the use cases wherein the auditors might use AI in a fruitful way or in a productive way to reduce their time and increase their productivity in general sense. Right? I'll probably show you that as well. Um, so from a real-time perspective, the bank and financial institutions, so essentially the BFSI, anyone who is operating into BFSI industry, they use AI to detect any fraudulent transactions. Okay. Now frameworks, GRC frameworks, so frameworks like NIST RMF, or standards like ISO 42001, it ensures that AI models comply with the regulatory requirements such as your GDPR and maintain data privacy and security. Because some of the principles that I mentioned about your ethics principles, that will include privacy as a big chunk of it. Okay. It will certainly talk about how do you store your data, where do you store your data, and your standard information security controls that's really required. But then with a bit more emphasized, because since AI is included here. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that from an AI use case perspective itself, not from a GRC perspective, just AI use in general. All right. Now, there are largely three types in here. Okay. Either you could have your own proprietary LLM model, right? Your LLM model, as in you're developing your own AI, if you have to put it that way in layman terms, if you're developing your own AI, or you're leveraging the existing model, you're leveraging the existing models into your products, into your products, into your products to achieve a certain outcome, to achieve a certain outcome. All right. The third part is you're just taking off the shelf. All right. You're just taking off the shelf, such as your Copilot. All right. You're using ChatGPT or Claude or anything else. All right. Or whatever it is, right? I'm assuming that you would know another model that came in, which was pretty affordable and pretty cheap out in the market, which was DeepSeek, but there were some security concerns related to that. Okay. Now, again, that's a very interesting, I would say, case study, or that's again something really interesting to read about, because even though LLMs or the AI models like such as these or DeepSeek, they are really good in nature, and they gives you the exact thing that you're looking for with enhanced productivity or whatnot. It comes with its own security risk, which is again really important to understand. I'm not sure how many of you would have known, back in 2023, one of the employees from Samsung, they sort of, to to get the right output, I would say, or to increase their productivity, or to, or to enhance their productivity, I would say, they sort of, inputted the code base, one of the code bases, into ChatGPT, and OpenAI was hacked right after. Okay. And once the OpenAI was hacked, a lot of those code bases were leaked to the hackers. And this is one of the incidents that happened in the nascent stage when AI was actually, becoming a thing back then. Okay. Now things like these makes you question that, is it really secure in nature or whatnot, right? And that's where you, as a GRC professional, plays a larger part in that sense. Okay. Um, just to be to be on the safe and to be on the same side or on the same page, you have to be very clear that protecting AI or securing AI is not only one's job or not only one team's responsibility or one person's responsibility. Okay, it's a collective thing. As a GRC professional, you would be looking at a certain responsibilities. As a normal staff or as a normal employee, you would have certain you would have certain responsibilities. As a management, you'd have a certain responsibility, and that's something that we'll discuss in the next slide. And that's where you collectively come together and ensure that things are in the right place and you're taking as secured measure as you can. And like I've been saying, since number of years, I mean, not in this session, that nothing is a 100% secure. Okay, nothing is 100% secure. If you're applying a control or whatever you do, that doesn't mean that you are a 100% secure. So no risk could be mitigated to 100% unless you decide to completely avoid it altogether. So when I say avoid, you're avoiding a certain process altogether to make sure that you don't come across that risk altogether. But if you're using something, you're always at risk. Okay. Now, the next thing is on a leadership impact. And this is a very big role for the leaders to play. Okay. And this is something that I've been, in the Australian market largely where I work. I've seen this, notion that leaders are getting involved more and more than before. Okay. And it's important because as an employer, as an IT guy, or as a cyber guy, or as a normal staff, you can only do so much unless it's coming from top down. It's really difficult to manage the whole of risks specifically related to AI. Okay. So in these sort of cases, you would see that an effective leadership shapes your entire AI governance. And a classic example from a framework perspective would be NIST AI RMF. So I've shared that link in the chat. So you might want to go ahead and do a read in on that. It's really good. Gives you a good, whole lot of thinking and challenging yourself in terms of your thought process. If you haven't come across this, in its entirety before this session. Um, the leaders have to foster a culture of ethical use of AI. Okay. Now, a classic example, and the examples that I'm giving you are completely real time. These are not hypothetical examples. These are completely real time. The Samsung one and the bank one and the one that I'm going to tell you right now, these are completely, real time examples. So these are not, fictional examples. Now, um, previously, and obviously, 2 or 3 years back, companies wouldn't have something called an AI policy or an AI framework altogether, all right? Or acceptable use policy, including AI in there, okay? Now, what I've started to see is that it's coming from the leaders, the company executives and the chairmen and the board of directors. They want AI to be emphasized when we are doing a cybersecurity review or when we are, or when we are going through these sort of reviews in general, right? And the classic thing that they want to include in there is to restrict the use of AI models, right? Now, from a technical point of view, you can only do so much. Either you restrict completely, which is, which takes a toll on your employees and their day-to-day activity, but at the same time, you want to have, some sort of control over them. And that's where your AI policy or AI governance or something similar to that framework implemented at an organization level comes into play, wherein you say that, what, you can use ChatGPT. That's fine. I am not restricting you from using ChatGPT. I'm not restricting you to use Gemini or whatever, right? I'm keeping DeepSeek aside because they had some serious, security concerns and they were banned from certain countries as well that had a very wide scale impact. But keeping those, sort of those examples or those incidents aside, things like ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini or whatever, right? So as a firm in the policy, what I would say is that, what, you can go ahead and use them. However, you need to make sure that there are no PII data in there are no company related data, and there are no IP data in there. So anything related to the company, you cannot input that into the into the chatbot or into the AI model, unless it is publicly known. It's fine, but then which is proprietary to the organization, you cannot really input that. Okay. Now, these sort of policies sort of helps you to bind an employee legally, or I would say contractually, if not legally, to ensure that employees know that what they are doing and what they're supposed to do. And that's where your training and awareness will also kick in. All right. So you would see that training and making employees aware is, becomes really key component in that sense, because it also depends that the way that you're training your employees, right? So say you're training your employee, just letting them know that you have to do this, blah, 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 and this is why we are doing it, right? But making them aware that if you fail to comply to this, what could be the disciplinary action, what are real life impacts, and you can give examples related to Samsung or any other examples that had happened in the past or in the market, which actually gives them a sense of responsibility, right? So it really depends on those aspects as well. And then other one is an extension of the second point, which is strategic decisions making, strategic decision making crucial for AI security, and the leadership involvement, which is really important. All right. As trivial as it may sound, that leadership, this is not a leadership problem or whatever, but it is really important for leaders to be, involved and be hands-on on these sort of, at least in these sort of topics, which is quite prevalent out there in the market, to ensure that, the compliance with regulations are met. Now, from a GRC, when it comes from a GRC perspective, or any, I'm not going to deep dive into the three lines of defense. So if you have not heard of the three lines of defense, before, you might want to go back and look into what are three lines of defense. But in general, at any line that you're working in as a GRC professional, it will be our core responsibility to ensure that, we need to make the leaders of the company or the leadership team aware that where do we stand in terms of compliance, from a regulatory perspective, from a contractual perspective and whatnot, right? And from an AI security perspective as well. So it becomes one of the core responsibilities for us to make sure that they are aware, and it's completely visible across the board, so that we can take appropriate actions from there, right? And then again, that's what I was coming down to, that transparent communication builds trust in AI systems. That what exactly are we looking at? Are we ready to take that risk? Are we ready to, implement those sort of systems and make available to our employees? Again, I'm not sure how many of us here have used Copilot for Enterprise, right? So you would see that the Copilot for Enterprise, it's really interesting, right? So you would see that there are two options when you open Copilot Enterprise, and funnily enough, they have been rebranding themselves, and it's called M365 Cloud now. But coming back to the point, you would see that there are two options. The first option would be work, and the second option would be web. Okay. The work one is pretty much connected to all your Microsoft services. All right. So imagine SharePoint, OneDrive, right? Your Power BI, or any services that you would have license for, even Outlook, your calendar, and pretty much everything in there, your emails and whatnot, right? So by default, it is selected to work. Now, in the work, if you give a prompt, and I really wanted to show you this, but again, I cannot show you from my company's laptop, and I don't have any other laptop that can show you this. So if you have access to Enterprise, you can go back and experiment by yourself. Coming back to the point, you would see that if you give a prompt that, what, I'm not able to find this file, can you find this for me? And what it does is it crawls to each of the Microsoft services that you would be using, especially SharePoint, OneDrive, wherein you can store your files, and it throws out the exact output that you are looking for, or the exact, the location of the file, if it is on Microsoft Cloud and not on your local laptop or on your local desk. So it becomes pretty scary. Now imagine, what if a threat actor has persistent access in your system, and they have been using your Copilot and, just going through going through the files and whatnot, it becomes really easy for them to move laterally and to move to get the relevant data out of the firm, right? So these are some of the key examples that we need to keep in mind, that we need to understand the key risk in there, and we need to understand that there are certain risks that comes with using AI system. And if you're developing your own AI system, then there's a whole bunch of different risks that will come into play. The other one is the last one that I wanted to discuss was around the risks related to AI. Again, the one that you see here are pretty high level. There would be a very detailed list of risks in there. And again, you can certainly refer back to ISO 42001, and you can certainly refer back to um, AI RMF from NIST. However, from a risk perspective, and this is something that could go into your risk register, which is line 2, if it hasn't already, is risks related to data privacy. Again, this tops the list because this is really important. Every country would have their own privacy laws, and we need to make sure that whatever systems that we are bringing in, we need to have appropriate security controls that helps us to comply with the local data privacy regulations. Biasness in the risk, right? Biasness in AI is another part of the risk, right? You don't want the output to be in a certain way, wherein it's biased towards something, right? And this has happened in the past. You would see many examples out there. Classic example would be DeepSeek. Even with ChatGPT, there were some cases wherein they were biased outputs, but again, it has been rectified as on date as we speak. The other one is related to security vulnerabilities. If you are developing your own AI model, it's really important to sort of go through your secure development life cycle and ensuring that your output is not biased. And again, from a security perspective, you're hosting in the right manner, blah, 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 right? Now, the other part is if you're using tools or LLMs off the shelf, all right? Say that you're using ChatGPT and whatnot. Are we completely reliant on SOC 2 Type 2 report? Are we completely reliant on ISO 27001 certificate, or what? All right. Or what else do we need to do there? So those are sort of questions that we might need to see. And that's where I was discussing around that there are largely 3 types of models that you'd see. Again, there could be a few more. There are possibilities to go for a few more. However, these are 3 are the main ones to look out for. And the last and the second last one is the misuse of AI. Again, it could be misused for something which is not intended to, like inputting your company IP or your PII or your personal data in there or whatever. And the lack of governance, the one that I was referring to as an example, that sort of tells you as an organization, our acceptable use policy says this. So you shouldn't be deviating from that. Otherwise, disciplinary action could be undertaken and whatnot. Now, from a GRC perspective, again, um, there are a few lenses that you could probably say, right? This is from a perspective wherein, if you are to use an AI system within the organization, these things become really prevalent for you to look out for, all right? Now, how the other lens is how AI could help you to be more productive in the GRC roles, okay? So again, in the interest of time, I wouldn't go into much detail, but I'll sort of show you an example how it could increase your productivity in your internal audit or in your external audit. All right. So typically, I'll just give you a bit of a background. I'm not sure how many of you are from audit background or have some knowledge about audit. So anyway, regardless of that, I'll probably give you a bit of a background what an audit is and whatnot, and then I'll show you practically how AI could be used in a much more productive manner and whatnot. Okay. Now, in internal audit or external audit or whatever type of audit you would say, there would be 2 to 3 things at least, right? There would be control, there would be test procedures, right? There would be test procedures, and there would be your test results. Okay. Now, typically, your control would be something that's a security measure. That's a security measure that an organization is undertaking. Test procedure are the steps taken by the auditor. Steps taken by the auditor, which is probably put it this way. Steps taken taken by the auditors to ensure that this control has been tested effectively or ineffectively, right? And the test result or the test outcome could be that the control is either effective or ineffective, all right? As in it is operating as expected or it is not operating as expected, okay? Now, the test procedures, I'll just pick one, sort of one activity in the audit side of things wherein you could use AI to be more productive is to write test procedures. Now, writing test procedures are, you would see if you have access to or if you have seen an audit report like SOC 2 Type 2 or SOC 1 Type 2 or any of the audit reports, the test procedures are written in a certain way. You would see that test procedures are written in a certain way. Okay. What I'll do is I'll train the model here. So if you see in audit regarding control and test procedure, this is an example control. All right. Now I would say that external data access is logged, and this is an AWS control. To be transparent, this is one of the controls for AWS data centers and their services actually. So this will help you to get more, practical in that sense. Okay. So external data access is logged with the following information: data assessor, IP address, object, and operations. Logs are retained for 90 days. This is an example statement for a classic control, right? And it's pretty, I would say it's pretty standard across all the SOC reports or any audit reports you would pick, external audit, internal audit, or whatever, right? Now, this is how an inspection control is worded, all right? So this is the test procedures that I was referring to in the second column, all right? So inspected the configuration setting, right? And this is written by the auditor, which is an independent reviewer of that particular control. So they say that inspected the configuration settings, push to S3 web servers to ascertain the servers were configured to log data, process IP address, object, and operation information, right? Now, what I would tell AI or ChatGPT or whatever you are using is to learn the logic and wordings of the test procedure specifically, all right? Because this is a pretty time-consuming task. I wouldn't say it's rocket science, but at the same time, it is a bit, I would say it's a bit time-consuming, right? So, and you would want to increase your productivity as much as you can, especially in the GRC side of things, wherein there are a plethora of admin tasks to do, and this is one of them, to be honest. Okay, so what I would say is that learn the logic and wordings of the test procedure and similarly help me with all the controls that I give it to you, right? And I'll just go in there, right? Now, what it says is that, it has learned in that sense. Now let's put it into action, okay? What I'll do is I'll have another control in there, okay? I'll have another control in there. Just give me a minute. And what I'll say is that here you go, that ABC performs whatever company it is. So in this case, it's AWS. So AWS performs application security reviews for externally launched product services and significant feature additions prior to launch to evaluate whether security risks are identified and mitigated. So it's a control in here. What I would say is that write all possible test procedures, similar structure to mine above, whatever I have given the example, right? And I would go in here. Now, this is the possible test procedures that you can use, all right? Now, if you go back and test this by yourself, and you would see that if you don't let the AI learn that what sort of output that you require, it will give you some, random statements, which is right. The logic is right. And, the approach is right, but that's not the output that you're looking for. So you'd have to train them and you have to specify them that what exactly are you after, and then post that you would sort of give your own input. Now, in this case, what I did was, you would see that, what I did was I gave it the type of output that I need, and then I give the input for an example control, right? And it gives me the output here. Now, you may or may not use the entirety of the output that's being generated. You can, you can certainly see some of these aspects and, just go in and see. I would say you can just go in and see if this makes sense to you. If it doesn't, it doesn't. All right. And then you train it better. What you would see is that it actually increases your productivity. Now, previously, I'll give you examples. So my team uses Copilot. We have Copilot Enterprise at Grant Thornton. So my team, I've trained my team to use certain prompts to generate test procedures, and I've actually seen my team's productivity to be increasing, in terms as compared to what we were 1 year before, I would say, or 1.5 years before, when we used to write all the test procedures manually. Now, any internal audit or AI audit that we go in, we have to present it to the executives, to the chairman, or to the board of directors, and we have to write it in a specific manner. And these are the sort of things that is not rocket science, but at the same time, these are important, right? Because it's not only about technology, it's about people, process, and technology in the cyber side of things. And it gives you an output, and then you can just go in and see if it's making sense. If it is making sense, you can use as is. If not, then you would amend that. However, regardless, it certainly increases, enhances your productivity, and then just you go from there. So that's pretty much it. So this is another lens, or I would say another key aspect that you would see, the use of AI in the GRC. And the first part that we discussed is securing AI itself, to an extent wherever we can, and to an extent wherever it is feasible and possible to start off with, right? So yeah, so that's pretty much it.